Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Recently the question came up, should I be free XPing across the Zieten, the tier 8 German battlecruiser? And my answer was pretty much, look, I haven't touched this thing since I've been testing the line, and personally, on my personal account, I haven't gotten there yet, so I figured I'd take another look and see how bad is this thing really, because this is tier 8, and tier 8 can be a little bit competitive by now, because last time I tested this was, I believe, before the introduction of things like the Atlantico. And also, tier 8 takes a little bit of time to get across. It's not quite as bad as tier 9, but still, it is a significant investment. So if you are going up the German battlecruiser line and you end up at tier 8 with this thing, what should you do? So, here we have the Zieten. One of those things where I feel like the ship designers had a couple too many beers and figured, you know what if... Just hear me out on this one. What if we put this bit here and that bit there, and then we'd actually have a ship? And then they'd go like, nah, nobody would ever build this. And then they went home and sobered up, and the next day someone picked up the plans from somebody's desk because they had left them there being completely drunk. And they had been presented to the shipbuilding commission, and they said, you know what, we're going to build this. And they were looking at each other and saying, yes, absolutely. We were completely serious about this design. This is going to be a great ship. And then made very, very quick and inconspicuous plans to get out of the country, because once that thing was actually constructed, somebody would come looking for them with murderous intent. So, the Zieten. Let's go through and have a quick look at the progression. How did we get here? So at tier 7, you find the Prinz Heinrich. The Prinz Heinrich is a bit of work. It's not a terrible ship, but it's a tier 7 and it does get into tier 8 games, and you start feeling the, yes, I'm actually not in a battleship, and if people pay attention, then I am in trouble sort of gameplay. Comparing the two ships, the only difference, at least in terms of ship skills, between the Zieten and the Prinz Heinrich is that the Zieten gets an additional sonar. She does get a couple more hit points, which is much needed, and she's a tick faster, but not a massive difference in terms of maneuverability. The biggest difference is, or the first biggest difference, is in the main guns. Now, the Prinz Heinrich was running 380mm guns, and in a very, very standard German setup with 8 guns, 2 forward, 2 aft. The Zieten gets the Nürnberg-Rhone treatment, but with 406mm guns. So better guns, significantly faster reloading than the 380s, but she only gets 6 of them. And out of these 6, 2 turrets are in the rear. Now the wide turret is 360 degrees, so it can rotate around all the way, which is pretty useful, but while these aren't bad guns on paper, the dispersion is hilariously bad at range. So unless you're shooting at something that's completely broadside, you're going to have a lot of trouble actually hitting things. And given that you are, well, usually not running away from stuff in a German battlecruiser, the turret placement itself is a little bit awkward. When it comes to the 150s, the Prinz Heinrich had, well, just casemate guns, which weren't bad, but sort of a tier 6 carryover. And the Zieten is starting to see twin turrets in a more modern 55 caliber length 150mm gun, which is a little bit better in everything. Not much, but a little bit. She then has an additional, but the number of 150 mils, by the way, is exactly the same. Just a little bit better. Then she gets the 105mm auto secondaries, which are often sort of the party piece of the line, because auto secondaries are firing in both directions by themselves. So while the 150s you can only ever fire one side or the other, the auto secondaries happily blaze away at anything that comes within range, which at this tier isn't an awful lot because it's a range of the German cruiser torpedo at this tier. But they're there, and you get an extra twin of them. talking about torpedoes, the Zieten gets, well, the same torpedo loadout with 2 quad launchers, side-mounted, the relatively long reload of 75 seconds, the absolutely pedestrian speed of 50 knots. Yes, French destroyers and Italian destroyers can look at these torpedoes and say, what, you think you're quick? And then just go, wee! But the range has been improved and the damage has been improved. So you got a bit more oomph in these torpedoes if you can manage to hit anything with them. But they do take a long time to reload and you don't have an awful lot of them, but they're there. The AA, as there is, has been noticeably improved, but by no means good. And the concealment is a little bit worse, but not an awful lot. So all in all, you could say from the values on just by the values on paper, I say, well, it's an overall improved Prinz Heinrich, right? The stats are just all around a little better. Well, if we compare to the Prinz Rupprecht at tier 9, which is where we're heading, then we notice that, first of all, the Prinz Rupprecht gets a better secondary overload and a better sonar. The Prinz Rupprecht gets a bit more armor protection. The Prinz Rupprecht gets a comparable maneuverability and gets the same guns, but in a more sane layout, but in return with a longer reload. And the Prinz Rupprecht gets technically the same secondaries with a better range, however. Gets technically the same auto secondaries, only an additional turret. We're seeing a pattern here with a slightly improved range. The Prinz Rupprecht, however, while getting the same torpedoes, gets 16 of them, which can sort of quite make the difference here. And the Prinz Rupprecht gets slightly better AA. So you could still argue that the progression from the Zieten to the Prinz Rupprecht is a relatively linear one. So what is it that makes the Zieten so awkward? Well, first of all, it's the gun layout. If the Zieten had a forward-oriented gun layout and had 2 turrets, Gneisenau style, 2 turrets forward, 1 aft, that would be better already. This ship is relatively big. I mean, compare that thing to the Bismarck. The Bismarck is looks like it's a tick longer, but the Zieten is a pretty chunky target out there. So it's got a lot of superstructure to catch things, and it just looks a bit weird. But all in all, technically, it's not a bad ship. It's just that starting at tier 7, German battlecruisers are demanding to be played in a specific style. Because you, like up to and including tier 6, you can kind of just, go out there because nobody pays an awful lot of attention to what's going on. To a degree, you can still do that in tier 7 because you still get into games where you're facing tier 6s. In tier 8, you're starting to face tier 9 players, and things will go, and tier 8 is one of those tiers where a lot of people are comfortable. So a lot of people eventually end up, grinding out a line and saying, you know what, tier 8 is what I play recreationally, tier 10 is what I play if I want to have a bit of more of a challenge. And as such, tier 8, the skill progression from a tier 7 game to a tier 8 game can be quite noticeable. So you actually have to play the ship to a degree to its strength. And this is where the problem in general also with German battlecruisers comes in. Because German battlecruisers need a specific scenario to be successful. German battlecruisers are having a lot of firepower, especially with the torpedoes in higher tiers, and having a lot of potential to do a vast amount of damage in a very short amount of time. It's just that the rest of the time, at long range, or if they have to play out in the open, they're not as useful because the armor is pretty, well, they're battle cruisers. The armor isn't the greatest. They're very secondary focused, so the main guns tend to be a little bit on the lackluster side. So if you're not getting into secondary range reliably to actually make use of these secondaries, then you end up with something at tier 8 that has 6 main guns. And they are laid out such that if you're in a sort of defensive position, you can't really use more than 1 or 2 of them, which sort of limits what you can do with these ships. Anyway, so I have 2 games for you, and then we'll talk a bit about the answer to the question, should I free XP over the Zieten? The equipment, I've gone with this with the secondary battery mod 2, which is the German module for both range and dispersion on the secondaries. I strongly recommend using this. You could theoretically use the auxiliary modification 1. I don't know why you would want that, because you're effectively getting only half the range bonus for a bit of AA range, and these are not AA ships, so I really wouldn't recommend it. Don't be tempted to get the main battery mod 3, because the dispersion is so hilariously bad, you're not going to do much of an impact, and these ships really need to play in secondary range to be successful. You could get secondary battery mod 1 for reload on the 150s. I personally would recommend going with mod 2. And while you could be tempted to go for steering gear mod, I think this is the this is the place where you should start getting used to the idea of playing concealment. So it's more of a hit and run ship, and less of a tank brawler. It might be German, but it certainly does not have German defenses. It's much more like it feels much more like a French ship in that regard. So concealment allows you to be a little bit more sneaky. Relevant commander skills on this ship, and again, because I'm assuming that maybe you're a new player, maybe you're grinding up the line, maybe you have a 12-point German captain, but I'm not actually getting the close quarters combat expert, which is the first relevant skill that you really want. Obviously, with the German battlecruisers, there's really no other good reason, you really want to go for a survival build. So plus 15% HP recovery and the repair kit cooldown time, because the style is more of a go in, do a lot of damage and try to get out again, heal up, and then do that again sort of thing, rather than a continuous battleship playstyle. You're a battle cruiser, you're not a ship of the line. And then obviously later on you would want the APCS and probably the horizontal protection. You could go for Giant Hunter to get more damage on the torpedoes, and it might be a viable strategy as well. You could be tempted to go for Adrenaline Rush. I would not necessarily recommend it, because the extinguisher is, especially with ships that have a relatively low fire and flooding resistance, make quite a difference in the amount of damage that you're taking from fire. So to me, that's the better choice here. And that's the ship. Last thing we need to look at is the elite bonus. You get the choice of 3% torpedo tube reload time. I would not recommend it, because first of all, you only get 2 quad launches, and second of all, your secondaries is where it's at, and 10% reload time is really not something to be sneezed at. So with all these values in here, because we've only ever seen it in the comparison, with all these values in here, we get the 150s to a 7.59 kilometer range and just above 7-second reload time. And we get the 105mm auto secondaries up to over 6 kilometers of range, which is quite nice. And that's all before the secondary overload skill kicks in, so you can get a relatively decent range on these things. Now, with this, and I'm going to go with the standard camo. I am going to get into 2 battles and just show you a little bit of gameplay from the Zieten. The first round we are playing on Encounter in base capture mode, obviously, in what I believe is a flat-out tier 8 game against Monarch, Kansas, Amagi, Almirante Grau, Hipper, Kagero, and Akizuki. Now, like I said, what you want, ideally, for a German battlecruiser to shine is a sort of ambush playstyle. So you want to find yourself a target, ideally 1 target, or at maximum 2. You want to get up close, you want to destroy that, and then you want to duck back into cover, recover some health, and find your next target. Now, this is all nice and good, but the game needs to let you do that. And oftentimes you find yourself in a situation that is unfavorable to this kind of approach and have to play in a style that German battlecruisers are not very much suited towards. And this is a fate that they share with other relatively specialized ships. The more specialized you are, the less general purpose you are. So I am spawning with what looks like a somewhat AFK Shimanto and a Tallinn who immediately abandons the right flank. This already tells me something, because this is, after all, Encounter. And I'm going to be facing at least one destroyer. So if most of my team is going to head over to the other flank, as things happen oftentimes, then my job here becomes a very different one, which is going to be to hold the flank. And I am spotted, which means one of the destroyer, which is either the Aki or the Kagero, is over there. I would prefer the Kagero, to be honest, because I have a sonar, so I can be relatively safe from enemy torpedoes. But the Akizuki can literally just stay at range. And we've got the Monarch as well, so HE spam galore coming in. And we'll start. Yep, there's the enemy destroyer, and by the looks of it and the rate of fire, that's the Akizuki. So I'm backing off. I do have Shimanto. Okay, Shimanto has awoken, so I do have Shimanto here, and obviously he needs to be somewhat careful. But he does have torpedoes, so I'm not. Yeah, there. That. Please shoot that. That is the thing that is causing us. Yeah, you're torpedoing the Monarch, obviously. That is the thing that we have problems with. So please shoot. There come the torpedoes. They were relatively obvious. Can you turn? I think he can turn. I'm not sure if he took a torpedo there, but he has been slapped by the Monarch, obviously, now. By the torpedoes forcing, and the Monarch has obviously retreated, knowing that the Shimanto has torpedoes. Please shoot at the Akizuki. That would be much appreciated. Now, Shimanto is turning away, does not want to engage any further, and has taken another shot from the Monarch, is now on fire, and it's going like, yeah, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be rushing things in my Japanese light cruiser. So, Akizuki, it's down to the two of us, I guess. Secondary overload up. Now, the problem obviously is that by now the Akizuki, well, I know that the Akizuki has a torpedo reload, and that was just one salvo, so there might be more torpedoes incoming. Which means I do have to be somewhat careful, and the Akizuki isn't completely stupid. He is not just sitting still broadside on, and I am going to have to switch the mains to the high explosive because I am going to. He has launched torpedoes because that's the only reason why he would be turning. He has played with a lot of hit points, but that means I can no longer give chase. Yep, there come the torpedoes. That's why I had to already slow down. Might have left it actually a little too long. And now he can just stay at max range, where my main guns are gonna have a devil of a time hitting him. And my secondaries are ineffective. So we are halfway through and nobody's died so far. But I've got an Akizuki and a Monarch and an Amagi to play with. So at this point, I have almost half the enemy team here for myself, which means that the rest of my team has half the enemy team for themselves, which means they should be somewhat in a numerical superiority, which I can live with. Sometimes you just have to play these kind of battles. Now, I could try and sort of kite away and sort of try to draw them after me. But at this point, I'm still hoping that the rest of my team can finish off. At this point, literally half the enemy team. That's all that's left. There are two cruisers and a destroyer on the other flank, and there's nothing else for them to do. And I was hoping that I might be able to do an aggressive push still, but it looks like that wasn't going to be. So unfortunately, now I'm in a reverse defensive position, which is really not a good position to be in the Zieten. So Akizuki is now obviously getting brave. He has seen that I've damage controlled my main gun being shot off. So I am now again in a defensive position that I'm not perfectly suited towards, because I have to turn the ship somewhat to get my rear turrets on target. The rest of my team still hasn't managed to do anything about the situation. So I'm going to try and get some torpedoes away against the Amagi. And Akizuki is literally just, I don't have to fight you at secondary range. I can just retreat. It's not a problem. Trying to belt tank the Amagi as much as possible here, because armor not the greatest, and Amagi's guns do hurt. That's my last heal, so I'm just really and it looks like my team has managed to clean up the two cruisers on the other side, but not the destroyer. Okay, the destroyer is still there, but my team should possibly have that. There's a battleship, 3 cruisers and an enemy destroyer and a friendly destroyer against 1 enemy destroyer. So you should have this, right, team? This is not that hard. And I'm just going to try and do as much damage here as I can, and literally keep Amagi and Monarch occupied for as long as I possibly can. But I am very much not going to survive this. I'm out of heals. I'm in reverse, which is less than an ideal position. Unfortunately, you know, like you could have said, well, maybe just rush in. Well, then I wouldn't have survived this long, because this is a battle cruiser. This is not a battleship. It does not have the greatest amount of armor. So that's my last 1500 hit points, and I'm going to die to that salvo from the Amagi most likely. But we're still a kill ahead, and even though my team has not managed to catch that enemy destroyer. So 40 seconds left. All my team has to do is not die at this point. That's a Tallinn, and now Monarch and Amagi obviously don't have anything else to do. And take down the Tallinn, which is unfortunate because now we're 10 points behind. Well, my team's still chasing that destroyer, so if the Takao can manage not to run into all these torpedoes from the Akizuki, that is right there in a smoke screen. Takao, kill the Akizuki. Kill, it's right in front. Kill, no. Okay, Takao decides that we don't need to win, so he YOLOs, gets himself killed, the Akizuki survives in a sliver of a health, and we're losing by 20 points. See, this is sort of what you can expect if you have to play the Zieten against the grain. Right? This is not what you want to do in this kind of ship. In this ship, this is not a good position to be in. This is not what the ship excels at. But this is just what you have to accept, and this is not unique to the Zieten. This is similar to the other battle cruisers as well. In this sort of defensive style, they're not particularly great. In the second round, we are actually top tier and playing a domination battle, which is much more to my liking, against Atlantico, of course, Nagato, Yukon, Edinburgh, Cleveland, and double Omono. So fair amount of torpedoes, but no destroyers. So that's good. And we are going to see where we're spawning. And we do have a good mix of ships on our side as well. So, okay. ACAP is probably the best choice here. I can give some early fire support to whatever destroyer and cruiser that is there next to me. That is an Akizuki. So switching the secondaries to armor piercing, torpedoes to narrow spread. And I'm going to head over towards ACAP, let the Akizuki take point, and because he's got smoke screens and he's the most stealthy ship. And we'll see what we can find ourselves to shoot at. There's a little island that I can use to defend myself against torpedoes or any kind of concentrated fire. So if you are getting focused by anything, you generally want to avoid that. It's better to take on targets one-on-one. That's where the German battle cruisers are shining. And we have the Miyoko. And the Aki has spotted the enemy Edinburgh. So hello Edinburgh. Secondary overload up. And there's also the Omono, so I do have to be somewhat careful with torpedoes. But I have a sonar, so I'm not overly afraid of it. And we'll see if they obviously smoke up, but Edinburgh is taking a lot of damage at this point. Yeah, smoked up. Let's see if we can get the main guns on target. This is a comfortable range for me to play in, because my secondaries have range on this. I'm going to just drop a bunch of predictive torpedoes into that smoke screen. It looks like Edinburgh has already vacated after losing just half his hit points. That could have gotten a lot worse, actually. There's still the Omono, so I can't push in much more aggressively, because I do have to be somewhat careful with torpedoes incoming. And I do have the sonar running, but it looks like they are not focusing on me, except for that Atlantico over there. But as long as I'm playing outside secondary range of that thing, it's not so much of a problem. So we have damaged the Omonov a fair bit, and the Edinburgh is coming around again. Hello, Mr. Edinburgh. Shots out. Unfortunately, again, the main guns are can be a little questionable, even at 7 kilometers. And I didn't have the X turret turned around. Okay, some torpedoes in the direction of that Nagato over there. See if we can take down the Edinburgh. Unfortunately, the Edinburgh goes undetected. There come the Edinburgh torpedoes, very much expected. And that Atlantico now has an Akizuki and a Miyoko. Plus, there's a battleship coming my way, so I need to reinforce BCAP. which means I need to go, okay, North Carolina takes down the Edinburgh, well done. I need to go after that Yukon over there and relieve my team from the crossfire, because my cruisers are in a crossfire around C Cup, and with the battleship needlessly pushing towards A here rather than reinforcing the center, I'm kind of forced to go in. Unfortunately, my torpedoes are on cooldown, so I can't use them against the Yukon. But the Yukon knows that I have torpedoes. He's already in reverse, so I was not going to get the torpedoes on target anyway, most likely. But we can use the secondary overload and just focus fire on the Yukon. Oh, Omono spotted. Okay, quick kill on that one with the mains, and then we'll refocus on the Yukon's bow with the secondaries. Unfortunately, I also now have the attention of the Nagato, who shoots my torpedo tubes off, which is very unfortunate and not welcome. But well, they weren't reloaded anyway, so I'm gonna give him the torpedoes on the other side. Hello, Mr. Nagato. I give you the secondaries on that side. But now it looks like my cruisers have died around C Cup, which means that I'm suddenly in a 4 versus 1 engagement, which is very much not what I like to be in. So let's try to finish off the Yukon as quickly as we can, and see if I can still get out of here while being shot at pretty much by everybody. And that's sort of the problem situation. You need to get out. You need to get out of there again. Okay, Yukon should be dead by now. I've got one more heal coming up, but now I've got Cleveland, Omono, and Nagato shooting at me. Shoot at someone else, please. Why? Oh, and I'm even taking shots from the Atlantico from the other side of the map. Why is everybody trying to kill me? Must have something to do with that press account marker on it anyway. So, yeah, that's the risk that you're running. But it was a good run. So now all we need, all my team needs to do is hold that advantage that we're having. But that Nagato's on low health. I've taken out the Yukon. That Atlantico's on no hit points. So Akizuki, you can probably kill that thing. Just stay out of secondary range. The Almirante Grau's gone down. That's a full health North Carolina. All you have to do now is sail north and keep your distance. Because that North Carolina, what are you doing? Why are you YOLOing into 2 cruisers and a torpedo cruiser, a Cleveland, and a Nagato? Okay, he's focused on the Omono. He's not paying attention. He obviously didn't get the Omono. At this range, the Cleveland is lethal, and there's still a Nagato left. We have an Amagi on the other side who could maybe take down the Nagato if he. Okay, the Atlantico has taken down the Akizuki with secondaries, because the Akizuki probably didn't do this right and stayed at range. And yeah, to nobody's great surprise, the North Carolina's YOLO has resulted in absolutely no kills for my team. And okay, the Akizuki has still managed to he's tried to torpedo an Atlantico that was on no hit points. To nobody's great surprise, the North Carolina has died, which means that Amagi is now very much alone and has no chance anymore of winning this. He might be able to take down the Nagato, but he's going to die. So it was a good run. It was a good attempt, but it doesn't always work out that way. So is the Zieten a bad ship? No. I would say it's not actually that bad. It could be better. So for starters, have the guns forward facing with the super firing pair rather than rear, which is a really awkward setup. If you need to go aggressively into things, you oftentimes can't really get much on target. But the Y turret is 360 degrees, so you're usually getting the Y turret on target as well, so that the rearmost turret, which means you sort of have it, even though you're not having a super firing pair forward. The secondaries are good, and the whole thing is a little bit of an upgrade over the Prinz Heinrich at tier 7. It's work. It's not an easy ship or a reliable ship to do good at, but then, in my opinion, the German battle cruisers are not reliable ships to do really well in, simply because they are very susceptible to focus fire, and it can be relatively situational how you have to play these ships and how you need to get what you need to do, or what kind of situations need to present themselves for you to play these ships successfully. So starting at tier 7 and definitely tier 8 is teaching you that. You have to accept the occasional defeat where you're just not getting an awful lot done because you never got yourself into a situation where you could play to the ship's strength. and you have to learn to, you know, sort of do the hit and run playstyle, similar to what, say, like French battleships are playing. And if you do that, then I think the Zieten is actually a manageable ship. It's not a great ship, especially not a tier 8. It's certainly not a great ship. It's kind of in the Gneisenau spot. It's a bit weird, but the progression is worth it. So tier 9 is a fun ship, mostly due to the increased amount of torpedoes that you can spit out. And yeah, that's it. So I hope that clarified that a little bit. Not an easy line to play. And if you are after something consistent, not probably the best choice, but a fun line to play if they work. And if you can shrug off the occasional, okay, well, that didn't work out scenario, then, you know, not the worst line to play. And that's it for me today. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.